Welcome to the Sunriver Anglers Fly Tying Corner, where each month we bring you a new fly pattern to give a try to on our Central Oregon lakes and rivers. In addition to showing you how to tie each pattern, I'll feature fishing technique tips and tricks, and I'll cover some of the entomology behind each pattern to help gain a better understanding of the bugs that we're trying to imitate. I have field tested each of the patterns that I feature each month to make sure that they catch fish. I'll cover tying instructions for the fly as well as materials to help you be able to recreate these patterns on your own vise. In this month's video, I'm going to tie a Balanced Damsel. This is a fly I've been using over the last several weeks out on Crane Prairie. It has produced in an excellent way with quite a number of 18 to 21 inch rainbows. Early on we were fishing in 4 to 6 feet of water with this pattern as the damsel hatch began. And lately, with the much warmer August weather, we've been fishing in 12 to 14 feet of water with this pattern. The damsel hatch tends to move into deeper water as the hatch period progresses, and so we've followed it out to these deeper waters, and this Balanced Damsel has been excellent. Give it a try. So let me briefly share the materials list for you. I'll cover each one in a little bit more detail as we tie the fly. So let's introduce the first materials. For a hook, I'm using a Firehole 516 in a size 14. I've used larger sizes. You can go anywhere from about size 10 down to size 14, but I like them a little bit smaller. For the thread, I'm using a 140 denier olive ultra thread, and this is really a nice thread for patterns like this because you can really bind down the thread hard on the hook, which is important to get that pin to set in place, as you'll see in the video. I'm going to begin this pattern by tying my thread on the hook shank, and I'm going to lay down a full layer the whole length of the hook shank. It's important to give something for the super glue to sop into as we tie in the pin and the bead. For the bead on this pattern, used to weight the front end of the fly and keep it balanced, I'm using a 3/32 tungsten bead, and that bead is painted olive to match the natural damsel. To mount the bead on the hook well out in front of the eyes so it balances on this Balanced Damsel, I'm using a sequin pin, and this is a size 8, about a ½ an inch long pin that I ordered off the internet, and it works well for these smaller balanced flies. Now I've taken one of my sequin pins and I've threaded a bead onto it, and I like to use a Sharpie to color up the head of the pin so I don't have this bright shiny silver. I'm using a brown that's closely approximate the color of the eyes on a damsel. You'll note I don't use eyes on this fly, so the pin helps create that image. So now I'm going to tie on the pin with the trailing edge of it right at the bend of the hook, and the front end and bead hanging in front of the eye of the hook. For the tail on this pattern, I'm using a dark olive marabou. Next, I'm going to take some marabou and I'll strip off a tuft of marabou about an inch 1.25 inches long, and I'll collect these fibers up to create the tail. I'll pre-cut the fibers the length I want them. I probably want the tail to run out about 1/2 inch to maybe 3/4 inch long beyond the hook shank. I'll tie that marabou in right at the bead, and I'll run it all the way to the very back of the hook. Next, I'm going to coat the body with super glue, and I'll take that super glue right up to the bead, and I'll go ahead and wind over the top of that with some fairly tight winds to keep that pin from moving. So I'll return my thread to the back side of the hook, and I will go ahead and tie in a dubbing loop, and I'll try and close the loop off by winding it over the back side of the body, and then I'll return my thread up to the bead right behind the bead. For the dubbing on this fly, I'm using Cascade Crest Tools Euro Seal. It's a seals fur substitute, and I'm using this in dark olive, and I've mixed about 15 to 20% of a UV ice dub in olive into this mix to give it a little bit of sparkle. I thought I'd introduce the tools that I'm using to help tie this pattern efficiently. I've got a dubbing spinner, and I've got a dubbing brush. Both are made by Loon, and they're excellent additions to helping you tie this pattern quickly. So now I'll tease out some dubbing fibers, and I'll go ahead and place those in my dubbing loop. I've put my spinning tool in the loop, and I've used my finger to hold the loop open so I can thread that dubbing in. And I'll go ahead and spin that quite aggressively. And then lastly, I like to take my dubbing brush and just lightly brush out these fibers to get as much of the fibers to be loose on the fly as I can before I spin it on the hook. So the last step in this fly is to go ahead and spin that dubbing loop using my vice's rotating features all the way up to the head of this fly. I've pulled my thread onto my thread holder on the vice as I do this, and I'll go ahead and capture the dubbing loop with thread at the head of the fly and tie that off with a couple of wraps. So I'll finish this by whip finishing a couple of times right there behind the bead. And then the very last step in this fly is I'm going to go ahead and take my dubbing brush and tease out as much of these fibers as I can, rubbing the fly fairly aggressively with the dubbing brush. And then I'll go ahead and stroke everything back and comb it back toward the tail to give it that nice flowing look in the water. So now let me spin this around so you can see all sides of the Balanced Damsel. So that has been your Sunriver Anglers Fly Tying Corner for this month. I hope you'll give the Balanced Damsel a try. This has been a really, really good pattern for me the last several weeks out on Crane Prairie as the damsel hatch has gone on. If you like what you see, please subscribe to this YouTube page and join us on Facebook at Sunriver Anglers. Thanks for watching.